Well, welcome. This is a fantastic audience for a Tuesday evening. I'm Linda Kuhn. I'm Dean of the Honors College at the University of Arkansas, and I'm thrilled to host this Honors College mic featuring General Wesley Clark. And before I introduce General Clark, I just want to go ahead and go over the rules of engagement. That sounds very formal, doesn't it? But in these Zoom days, every session has its own rules. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the liberty to mute y'all and turn your cameras off when you come in, not because we don't love you, but we're trying to cut down on distorting noises and things like that. So when the Q&A section comes up, I'm going to ask folks to put their questions in the chat, and then I'm going to call on y'all to go ahead and put yourself up on the screen so the general can see you and ask your question. So that's how we're going to do this. General Clark is going to make, I hope it, he's going to give us a fantastic lecture, but he also is very interested in you all asking questions. So that's how it's going to go. But before I introduce, I'd like to thank my colleague, Dean Todd Shields of the Fulbright College of Arts and Sciences, and also his executive assistant, Lane Schmidt, for their partnership in this event. And the Honors College mic features brilliant researchers on campus and fabulous leaders in the state of Arkansas. Though I would say in General Clark's case, that would be beyond Arkansas to the entire nation and even global. So let's go on and introduce General Wesley Clark, who's giving a lecture tonight called What's Next? And this is about the best timing in the universe. I can't take credit for the timing, General, but oh my goodness, there is a lot to discuss politically, globally in this lecture. But I'm going to give a little bit of a different type of introduction here. Many of us know Wesley Clark as a great Arkansan, as a great general, as a great global player in a whole series of pressing issues. But looking at his resume, he has a lot to offer our honors students. In fact, this is a super high-end honors resume in origin. General Wesley Clark was a National Merit Scholar. Woo! We do love that. First in his class at West Point, Rhodes Scholar, getting his MPhil from Oxford University, and in true honors style, multiple majors, philosophy, politics, and economics. And I think that I'm correct in saying that those three majors have served you brilliantly throughout your career, General Clark, and I want to bet that philosophy was queen in that decision, a super important major. General Clark served in Vietnam. Indeed, he was wounded. He went on to have an incredibly impressive 4 decades in the U.S. military, retiring as a 4-star general, having had the positions of Commander of the U.S. Southern Command, the U.S. European Command, the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. And I could go on and on about this amazing career. And we certainly know very well the general's work with the NATO forces, leading to victory in Operation Allied Force, a 78-day air campaign, backed by ground invasion planning and a diplomatic process which saved 1.5 million Albanians from ethnic cleansing. He's had multiple honors nationally and internationally, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And he is an Arkansan. He's coming live tonight from Little Rock. Let me very proudly and excitedly introduce General Wesley Clark. Take it away.
Well, Dean, thank you very much for that overly generous introduction. I hope I can live up to the billing you're giving me, but it's a real pleasure to be here and to see everyone. I'm a big Arkansas fan. I'm a big Razorback fan, and I really admire what the university's done for the state and what the Honors College represents. It's a fantastic credit to the state of Arkansas, and I'm really honored to have the chance to hear your views tonight. So let me just by way of introduction say a couple of things. I've been in the military, I've been in business, and I've been a political candidate. So I'm lucky enough to be able to look at leadership from all three perspectives. And I'm in business mostly today. I do business around the world. So I have relationships, China, Indonesia, Central and South America, Canada, of course, all through the United States, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Kazakhstan. I get all kinds of comments about the United States, about our policies, about our leadership, about our history, about our future. And so I've got a lot of information and perspectives I want to share with you tonight. I do business in finance, security, energy, and even medicine. So I've just gotten really broad. And Dean Kuhn, I do want to say that the philosophy, well, it has gotten me in trouble occasionally. So I try to keep my feet on the ground and be practical, but sometimes I get a little too theoretical and philosophical. So my wife and Gert and I, we moved back to Arkansas after I got out of the military. And I've got an investment bank in DC, and I was traveling overseas 14 or 15 times a year until COVID. And now I'm just in Little Rock, wearing my mask, going to the swimming pool to do my swimming practices, playing golf occasionally, trying to stay out of grocery stores, not going to restaurants. But that's life under COVID. So look, the title of this was What Now? Because we have come through an incredible period. This presidential election was really astonishing in terms of the amount of money spent. Joe Biden raised $1.5 billion. And in terms of the extreme passions that have been invoked, really ever since Donald Trump was elected, and maybe before that, if you go back to the election of Barack Obama, politics has become passion in America. It's almost like sports. We're in the SEC, of course, and I always joke with my friends in Ole Miss, Tennessee, Alabama. We can't joke with Alabama much because there's nothing to joke about with Alabama. We just hope that Nick Saban's going to retire soon. But politics shouldn't be about teams and tribes. It's supposed to be about the common interest, about coming together, working together. People on the other side of the aisle are not enemies. They're not adversaries. They're just people with a different perspective. And when they're in Congress or the state legislature, their duty is to look out for the common good, to build a more perfect union, to promote the general welfare, to secure the national defense, and so on, just like it says in the American Constitution. It's a product of compromise, and we're in a nation that has built itself on compromise. In our country, we believe the process has to be more important than any specific outcome. Now you could call it, I don't want this to be taken the wrong way, but it's an article of faith. It's like a secular faith. You believe in democracy, that there's something common about the will of the people that, well, for all their differences, and some people aren't as well educated and some people aren't, but somehow when you put it all together, it has to work for America. That's the faith that keeps this country together. If you believe that any single outcome, the ability to say Merry Christmas and not have somebody say Happy Holidays back to you, or things like right to life versus choice, or the ability to have an assault weapon in your house versus not. If you believe these issues are more important than the democratic process, then you don't understand the American Constitution. And you're not really in your heart a loyal American. You're living in the country, you're a citizen, but you don't understand the process we live under. And what we've seen increasingly as politics has become more partisan is that people on both sides of the aisle get so committed to their point of view that it's almost like we'll do anything to get it. In the Army, when I was a company commander, you were always taught before an inspection, never tell the sergeant, just get it done. Because when you tell him that, he's going to go take a part off the vehicle from the other company, and that's called theft. And he's going to do it. And he's going to say, well, sir, you told me to just get it done. So you realize there are rules of the road. There's process that's extremely important. That's really the bedrock of who we are. Now, some people are really disturbed by the emotions in politics in the United States. But look, if you go back to American history, we've always had that. It's a struggle. We were lucky we got the U.S. Constitution ratified in 1787. There were bitter opponents to the Constitution, bitter divisions between the North and the South, between merchants and traders and people who had plantations. We had the compromise, the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which set where the line between slave-owning states, and that really didn't really last. I mean, we grabbed Texas. It was admitted as a slave-owning state. We couldn't resolve it in the 1850s. We went to war. After the war, and since the Civil War, we've had in this country, we're in our third major political cycle. Think of it this way. First, there was the Gilded Age, rapidly industrializing America, immigrants pouring in from Eastern Europe, and lots of exploitation of labor. We were into iron and steel and railroads and oil, and monopolies emerged and trusts, and people in the North, they hated it. There were rallies, there were unions trying to be formed, there was union busting, there were strikes, there were lockouts, and people died. And it happened all too often. Today, it's a big deal if you had a strike and people got killed. Happened all the time 100 years ago in this country. And in the South, there were the Jim Crow laws. And they maintained a strong racial injustice and stability, at least superficially, in the South. And around 1905, tempers flared so much that a new movement started called the Progressive Movement. Theodore Roosevelt jumped on, but really the Progressive Movement, the second big cycle, lasted until around 1970, maybe 71, 72. And during that period, government actually intervened to help people. It was more than just the Edmund Burke 18th century of philosophy that says that government governs best, which governs least. Maybe that was the animating spirit on the American frontier. I got my barbed wire. I'm keeping my cattle. Get those damn sheep out of here or I'll shoot them. Okay, fine. But starting in 1905 with the Progressive Era, we took the election of senators away from the state legislature. That was to reduce corruption. We began to regulate interstate commerce. We busted up the big monopolies and trusts. We gave eventually union the right to organize. We gave women the right to vote. It took the Depression to really go after the banking system and to stop the games with banks and stocks. FDR put in Social Security. He actually raised the marginal tax rate up. He made a lot of people mad. He got the tax rate up above 70%. And when I was a young man growing up in Arkansas, the marginal tax rate was 91%. So you gave 9 out of every $10 you made on the top, if you were a high earner, back to the federal government. People were happy. This was the Progressive Era. Eisenhower, Republican, was part of the Progressive Era. He brought the troops into Little Rock to enforce desegregation. He believed in the law, and he was not a person who necessarily favored desegregation. It wasn't in his heart. He liked the interstate highway system, and he'd grown up in a segregated army. It was Harry Truman who desegregated the military after World War II, but Ike enforced the law, and he was a president of laws. He built the interstate highway system. Even Nixon came along and put in, after Johnson got civil rights and Medicare, Nixon worked and put in the Environmental Protection Agency, the Office of Economic Opportunity. And then it was the sort of ending of the cycle. People said government's corrupt, the too big a government, too confusing, too many different committees, overlapping programs, taxes too high. You can do it better in the private sector. And step by step, we begin to disassemble the government programs that had brought America the prosperity that we look back on in the 1950s. When people say, hey, make America great, like in the 1950s. Well, that was the help of government that did that. Since then, we've deregulated, we've taken away fairness in media, we've reduced the marginal tax rates, we've let private enterprise run outsourcing on government functions, and we're still hammering on government. Not good enough, not good enough, do less, do less, do less. And now we've hit COVID. And it's like one of my friends told me, he said, look, you can't, in America, you can't enforce mask mandates and stuff like this. This is a country of the frontier. Okay, it is. It's also a country of great COVID infections. And so, we're going to have to come to terms with the 21st century, I think. And what you see in people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the left and the Quad makes a lot of people nervous. They seem extreme. A lot of people don't like Bernie Sanders. He can't do anything. He's a socialist. He even claims to be a socialist, which is maybe not so smart politically in highly conservative America, but he's got a lot of followers. And the reason he does is because people see what's happened for the last 45 years and they say, we're back to the Gilded Age. The wealthy just keep getting wealthier and ordinary people, their wages are stagnating. Why can't we get a $15 an hour minimum wage right now? What are you letting those producers off the hook, those gas producers, on methane for? Why won't you listen to the climate change scientists? Why do you want to deny it? We went through this with big tobacco 30 years ago. We know the strategy. Listen to the science. So the energy's building on the left. But something incredible happened in America over the last maybe 8, 12 years, maybe deeper than that, in the competitive give and take between political parties. And American political scientists, they used to say, these American political parties, they're not real political parties, okay? I mean, real political parties should be like the Tories and Labor. They should have strong opinions, enforce discipline, kick their members out if they don't do the right thing, and we'd have a better democracy. That's what the great political scientist Robert A. Dahl was teaching us all back in the 1960s. Well, it's happened to at least one party, and that's the Republican Party. And so they have real party discipline. But unfortunately, in the quest for political power, which began with really in the 1980s, late 80s, early 90s, Newt Gingrich told the Republicans, he said, listen, you will never be the majority party if you just go along with the Democrats. You have to fight them. And then they said, the thing is that with immigration and birth rates and stuff, Republicans are going to be the minority party. And so we have to stand up and take advantage of it now. And year after year after year, this has built a self-reinforcing structure in the Republican Party, which has made it, well, it's a minority party, but it has tremendous power and loyalty and control. And it's an alliance between the people at the top who like the deregulation and low taxes for business, and most of the voters who are motivated by theology or guns rights or right to life or some moral purpose. And Democrats keep saying, well, what's the matter with these people? They vote against their economic interests. And I keep telling Democrats, people vote on what they believe is best for the country. If you think that everybody should vote on their economic interests, you don't understand America. This is a country that has values, it believes in things. So we've got a tension between the two parties. They're very different parties. And Donald Trump just appeared on the scene at the right time with the right skills and background. He's a very clever, determined, strong-willed person. The Democrats have consistently underestimated him. He's got real loyalty among his followers and a lot of people that go along because they like the judges he appoints or the policies he has created. And he has really energized a group inside America to the extent that, well, he believed he should be reelected, and he wanted to be reelected, and he believed it was more important than the process. One of my friends in Congress explained that a leading Republican congressman said, you know, I've been to the White House, I've talked to President Trump, he really doesn't understand that process on the 6th of January, it's just a certification, it's just formality. He thinks it's a real decision. Now, come on. If you believe that, I'm gonna show you the Brooklyn Bridge again. But that's the mythology that many people are relying on as they go forward. So here's Joe Biden. He's got to deal with COVID. What does he need to do? Masks, vaccinations, testing, I think air disinfection, and he's got to be a leader. He's got to help the states. The states lack the resources in their health departments to really manage this. So ask them, they'll tell you. I've asked around. He's got to worry about the economy. He needs a $1.9 trillion stimulus plan. Is he going to get it? Going to be very tough. He's already admitted he might have to compromise on it. But somehow we got to put America back to work. All those people who have 16 million unemployed have lost their jobs, and they want back in, and they want real jobs. We got too many people with college educations who can't use those educations the right way, because in America, we've systematically disinvested. We've invested in manufacturing overseas, and we've worked on travel, tourism, and entertainment here at home, to the extent that it's very difficult for a lot of young people to find traction to move into more productive and remunerative jobs. At the same time, what's happened in America is businesses have become lots more clever at shedding the workforce when there's a recession. So in the 1970s, if there was a recession, businesses lost profits. In the aughts and teens, if there's a recession, businesses just let labor take it up. They release their contract workers and they maintain their profit margins. It's all done legally with contracts and so forth, but people sense the injustice of it. And so President Biden's got to deal with that. Got to deal with climate change, got to put a price on carbon somehow. You can't order people, tell them what to do, but you've got to somehow let the market solve it. But the market can't solve it unless you make the private costs equal to the social costs. It's what you call externalities in economic terminology. So that means you got to raise the price of carbon, because when you pay $1.89 for gasoline and you drive on the road, actually you're releasing carbon, and that carbon is going to have an adverse impact for hundreds of years. It's going to cause, well, I don't want to go into that. We can talk about that. But the point is, you have to have a price on carbon. Got to deal with China and Russia. President Biden says he wants to establish global leadership, starts with Europe. Europe is the cockpit of conflict today. When I got out of the military, I was meeting with Condoleezza Rice, and she said, we don't need troops in Europe, she said, we're going to put those troops where we need them. I said, well, what do you need? Where are you going to put them? She said, the Middle East, of course. I said, but why do you need them? She says, because that's where we're going to fight. This was the summer of 2000. I said, yes, but I thought the purpose of our military was to prevent wars, not just to go fight them. So we had a sort of disagreement at that stage, but we've 20 years neglected Europe. And Europe has the technology, the values, the economy, the structure. It's highly sought after today by Russia and China. We fought 2 world wars to hang on to Europe. We have to hang on today. So Joe Biden's number one problem is going to be bring Europe back into believing in America. And then working with Europe on our side, we can deal with the challenges of China and Russia and the Middle East. But we need a stronger, deeper partnership, not just military, but economic, in a way that we've never quite wanted to have before. So I think you're going to see a lot of effort on that. Still got a terrorist threat. North Korea's got more nuclear weapons than it's ever had. the armed forces are struggling with social issues in the armed forces and just plain battle fatigue. We never thought the volunteer army was going to fight a war for 20 years, but we're still there in Afghanistan, still there in Iraq, got special forces all over the world. And the American people, well, most of us, we're not in the military. We don't know people that are in the military. We don't want to be in the military. It's a volunteer force. And so it has its own issues in that regard. So what now? Well, we're 1 week into the new administration. Impeachment's underway. Tempers are rising. You're in for the greatest show on earth if you're living in the United States over the next 4 years. This is going to be nip and tuck. It's going to be struggle. It's going to be really trying to understand it, support the right people with the right issues, and above all, love and respect each other, even when we've got differing opinions. So, Dean Kuhn, can I stop there? I'd love to hear what the audience thinks and pick up some questions.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the historian's long view in your comments, because unfortunately, the past is always haunting us.
Yep.
Well, thank you, General, for those wonderful remarks. And I'm going to go ahead and open it up. If y'all would like to put questions in the chat, and I already have several, I'm going to invite the question askers to go on camera and ask their questions directly to General Wesley Clark. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the first question, which is from Kelly Flynn. Kelly, you want to get up on the camera and ask your fine question, which I myself want to know the answer to. So, Kelly, are you out there? This is the one problem with Zoom. You can't always tell if the people are still, there she is.
Well, she sent me, let's see, she sent me a question.
She's still here. Kelly, can you get on the camera here?
I believe that Kelly doesn't have a camera, but
Yeah.
Kelly,
Oh,
I
okay.
have given you permissions to unmute yourself. So you're welcome to just speak into the microphone if you're able.
Yeah. Go ahead and ask your question.
Something's wrong.
I'll ask it then. No worries.
Okay.
First, hi, Wes, she says.
Okay.
How would you suggest a process for public servants as well as individuals to discredit the QAnon and stolen election theories? Great question from Kelly Flynn.
Well, I do think that, President Trump, when he came in, he waged a perpetual campaign. And President Biden has, or will have, the most experienced, competent cabinet in living memory. Everybody's been there before. I know a bunch of these people. They came up, they were, youngsters during the Clinton administration, and they made it the whole way through. That's a spam call that I can't get. So now they're into positions as Secretary of State, head of the EPA, domestic counsel. I mean, this is a great, great team of experienced leaders. It's like nothing we've seen in America in the recent past. And therefore, President Biden should be freed up to come to America, to go to communities, to go to people that didn't vote for him. He said he's going to look for all Americans, work for all Americans. Good, come to Arkansas. Come to talk to us. If 2/3 of the state didn't vote for you, Joe, come down here. And don't just go to Little Rock or Fayetteville. Go to some place where everybody didn't vote for you and take the questions and lay it out. I think it's just more than any one person can do, but I think he has to do that personally himself and put a couple of days, a month into it, maybe more initially. He cannot take it for granted that, I'm just going to raise some money for the next campaign. No, put 30,000 people into a stadium and talk to him. He's as entertaining and fun and much more genuine than the man who was doing that in the previous administration. I think beyond that, I think he really does need to put together a team with the facts. We need to hit churches, college campuses, civic groups, and re-talk the election. I don't think you can take it for granted. I think Americans' democratic legitimacy has been challenged. So I think you got to go back, but you have to know, you have to have your facts, you have to have the right people, and you cannot make it adversarial.
All right, thank you. Another great question from Marcus Contrell. Marcus, do you want to ask your question? There's Marcus.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
General, first of all, thank you for your service. I really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody else here does. With all your time and leadership experience, what would you say the biggest challenge that you faced is, and like what steps did you take to overcome it?
The challenges you go through in life, they vary with age and position. So the challenge I had as 4-star general was a big challenge, but I had big challenges that were really tough at every stage of my career. I remember my first company command. I was at Fort Riley, Kansas. There was a blizzard, and it was during the Vietnam War, but before I could go to Vietnam, I had to do 4 months in the United States. So the troops were tired. Many of them were Vietnam veterans. The non-commissioned officers were less qualified than they should have been. My first sergeant was not the right age and experience for the leadership responsibilities he held, and he had a drinking problem. And one night I got a call from the wife of the cook who said, "My husband, he doesn't love me anymore." This is a midnight call. And my wife and I just gotten in bed, and the phone rings and says, "My husband, Sergeant so-and-so, doesn't love me. He has another woman. He's brought her back." And so my wife's saying, "Who is this person? What's going on at midnight?" So you have to deal with people, and the people are not necessarily, they didn't understand calculus, okay? They weren't Rhodes scholars, and maybe their IQ wasn't 150, maybe their IQ was less than 100, but they're real people, and you're bonded in a team, and you have to reach out, understand those people, communicate with them, and bring them together to form that team. I think, the great gift of life is to have experiences like that early, because it's a lesson that you learn and relearn and relearn. But the sooner you start learning it, the better. You have to get along with people. When I was a little kid and playing, and I remember my stepfather told me, he said he heard me playing Little Army in the bedroom with one of the neighboring kids. We had a little army men lined up. I was about maybe 10 or 11 years old. And he told me after my friend left, he said, "Kid, you have to be more diplomatic. You can't be so bossy." And you realize, the best leadership book ever written probably is Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. You have to think about other people and get them in the boat with you.
All right. Yeah, leadership's tough, especially at this level we're talking about tonight. I'd like to ask Smit Patel. You want to come on camera and ask your question, Smit? It's kind of a follow-up on Marcus's question.
Sure, I would love to. So my question is, when you have multiple leaders within a team, how do you unite them? Because there's so many people trying to do so many different things with different visions, but they all have to come under one goal. How do you do that?
Well, look, everything in leadership is specific, It all depends on the circumstances, the task, the authorities, the experiences, the personalities. And some people are just easy to deal with, and some people are really hard to deal with. And I believe in this quality, they call it emotional intelligence. So I think the best prescription I could give you is this: a good leader always has a sense of where he wants to take the team. But a good leader should listen more than he talks. And he should, or she should then bring people together around what's common and give people credit for their ideas. That's the best recipe I can give you. I'll tell you but I'll just give you one more little episode that meant a lot to me. I was a camp counselor at the boys club camp in Little Rock when I was in junior high school in the 9th grade, 10th grade, I guess this was. And there was a young boy about 8 or 9 years old who was a camper, and he came from a broken home, and you could tell he was shy and really felt like he wasn't a good athlete. He didn't have anything special about him. He wasn't going to be a quarterback on the Arkansas Razorback football team when he grew up. But they had a campers competition, and I worked with him to memorize something called the Camper's Creed. And it says, I'm a Kiwanis camper. It was like memorizing a poem. And he said it, and he won the blue ribbon for the best recital of the Camper's Creed. So this was like 1960. In 1999, I got a letter from him. He was a missionary in South America, and he wrote me, and he said, "You helped me understand who I am by having me learn the Camper's Creed and win a blue ribbon." If you can do that with other people, it doesn't matter whether you're the leader or the follower. It's really about helping each other realize your potential. That's the joy in life.
All right. We have about several questions centering around partisanship, which is a subject you addressed in your remarks. And this one's from Keaton Smith. I'll pick his first. Keaton, you want to ask the general your question?
Sure. Thank you, General Clark, for your time tonight. So I'd love to hear more of your thoughts around climate change and specifically federal climate policy. I've been following the move towards bipartisanship in this space and personally volunteer with Citizens Climate Lobby. And there's been a number of different bipartisan proposals over the last couple of years, including the Climate Leadership Council, and we're starting to see more right of center climate advocacy organizations and businesses really changing their tone. I'm curious if you have a preferred framework for federal carbon pricing policy and what your thoughts are on how to ensure bipartisanship and get something across the finish line.
Okay, well, that's really asking me two questions. So I will tell you this, that in democracies, people run afraid of their constituents. So in 2009, when we were about to do looking at doing cap and trade, and I was very active in renewables and so forth. And somebody called me and said, "You got to call your senators and you got to tell them they've got to support cap and trade." So I called one of the senators, and the senator said to me, "Well, I can't do that because cap and trade is going to raise electricity prices. And Arkansas, there's a lot of poor people in Arkansas. At that time, our median state wage was like $35,000. Said, people just can't afford to pay for cap and trade. So I'm going to have to vote against it." So I felt pretty bad about this. Cap and trade didn't go through for a lot of different reasons. And about 3 months after it was defeated, the state raised the electricity prices. Entergy raised its electricity prices anyway. But the senator wasn't blamed for it. Had the senator voted for cap and trade, the political opposition would have blamed her for it. So there's a lot of dodging and weaving in politics. Elected representatives are fearful of the revenge of their voters. So your advocacy group, it's very important if you can bring strong advocacy. The strongest advocates are people like the gun owners, NRA members. They don't care about anything but the right to bear arms, the Second Amendment. They don't care about healthcare, jobs, minimum wage, China, Russia. It's about the Second Amendment. They're single issue voters. That's why states like Colorado have had such a problem with trying to put in legislation. 80% of the people, 70% of the people want gun control legislation, but they're all over the map. Some are Democrats, some are Republicans, some are interested in healthcare. But oh, by the way, there should be gun control. There's people who don't want it. That's all they care about. And so the elected representatives know this. Advocacy works. Can it be made bipartisan? Yes, if you can find the ways to reach people on both sides of the aisle. Today in politics, it's about money first, and then it's about votes. One of the things I hope President Biden is going to be able to do is we're going to be able to reduce the dark money in politics. I don't think you can ever take the money out of politics. President Carter told me one time, he said, Wes, he said, do you know how much money I had to raise to run for president? I said, no, Mr. President. This is like 10, 15 years ago. He said, not a penny. My campaign was publicly financed. Well, that's true. That was the campaign in the general election. His primary campaign was not publicly financed. And so he was raising money. Still, it's better than where we are today. We've got to reduce the money in politics in order for public interests to have a greater chance for being accepted as policy as opposed to private interests.
All right, how about switching gears a little bit to education? I'd like to ask Paul Gramling to pose his fine question. You out there, Paul? There you are.
Paul. Hi, Paul.
Hi, how are you? I had a question. You mentioned how many college-educated citizens in today's, in America today can't find jobs that pertain necessarily to their degrees. And I was wondering if a solution would look like reforming society to align with the current education system, or if we should look at reforming the education system to kind of adapt to the current state of society.
Yeah, I think it's a little of both, really. Education is good in itself, and I mean it teaches humility, because not everybody makes an A on every test, and some things are really hard to learn. So you learn you're not the smartest person in the world. It teaches life skills, and it gives an opportunity to mature in a safer space than in the workforce, where you get judged every day and judgments have painful consequences if they go against you. So education is a good thing. And United States, we were the first country to mandate public high school education for the entire country. And we used to have truancy boards. If you didn't finish high school, they would find you. You were in the pool parlor, you're going back to school, or they take you to your parents. That gave us a huge advantage in the 20th century. But now people all over the world do high school online. After World War II, the VA GI Bill gave veterans a chance to go to college. And we had another huge jump in workforce capacity. But what's happened is that starting in the 1980s, really, public funding for education was reduced and there was more private funding, and the gap was taken up by student loans. And yet people pushed their kids to go to college. And there was a sort of stigma about getting skills rather than having a college degree. And so a lot of people got college degrees and they're educated, but they don't have the specific employable skills, or they didn't go to the right college, or they're not in the right location, or they don't know the right people. So there's a huge industry of networking and friends that operate on this. I feel badly for the kids that went to college, incurred a lot of student debt, and then went into things. People always say, do what you like in education. You can study something you're interested in, okay? But if you're interested in dance and theater and you really love it, you have to understand it's a very, very tough climb to the top. There's only so many Barbara Streisands and Lady Gagas out there. And with the internet, it's more and more concentrated. So it's more and more difficult in the arts to make it to the top. I think the education system is going to have to come to terms with this. I read an interesting article, Dean Kuhn, that said countries have revolutions when they have too many PhDs that are unemployed. And I don't know if that's a fact or just a hypothesis, but I do know this, that it's really important for kids in college to get a balance between the skills they need to be employable and the things they want to learn about. And especially, I would say, you've got to have the hard skills, because you can always go back and read history books. Now, you may not get it as well as you did in the history class at the University of Arkansas, but you can read it in your 50s and 60s and say, gee, I remember something about that, the holy smoot tariffs. What was that about now? And you can learn it. Whereas it's really hard to go back and learn integral calculus when you're in your 50s and say, I really need calculus to be able to understand modern stock market theory. You can't go back and easily get those skills later. But there's another problem since we're talking about education. The workforce has to be continuously trained and adapted, and jobs come and go. And we don't have the right mechanism in this country to take people who've been laid off from a job or made redundant, or the business moved out. We don't have the right mechanism to take these people, say, here's going to be next job, but you need a 12-month course or a 12-week course. You need to learn how to work a 6-dimensional engineering cutting machine, or you need to go back and get reschooled. And if you do this, we will make sure you and your family can relocate to the job site. We'll take care of selling your property or renting your home as you choose. We'll help you and your kids get relocated. We'll make sure that when you finish the schooling, there's really a job there. There's no mechanism like that in America. We put billions of dollars every year into these efforts, and they're marginally effective. 30, 40% of the people who go and get additional training and education in midlife get hired in that space. And for the majority, usually it's like, well, they said there was going to be a job, but there's no job here. Yes, because the market system isn't that effective. I've got some ideas on how to fix it, but I should stop there. Look, it's every individual's responsibility to grow into the workforce and stay current and updated with modern technology and trends. It's your individual responsibility, but the government should be able to help. And we've got to get that balance right. You should plan on, when you graduate from college, you should plan on 10 years out, you're going to need more education. Maybe you take it online. Maybe you just read books. 25 years out, the things that you're learning and you learned in 2020, 2021, they're going to be old hat. There'll be new technology, new techniques, new things coming. And if you're going to be current and employable and living up to your potential and find the kind of satisfaction on the job you're looking for, you've got to commit yourself to personal growth.
All right. Well, I'd like to add that history is not a job, it's a calling. I'd like to also invite Harshdeep Singh, who has a great question about the economy. Harshdeep, would you like to come on camera?
Hi, General. You're talking about how the American economy is switching away into more tourist-based jobs and how we're switching into more service sector-based economy, and how we slowly lost manufacturing jobs, industrial jobs over time.
Yep.
But given problems such as outsourcing and automation, how are we going to get, how is it possible to get some of those jobs back? Because in industrialization, I believe our production has gone up, but the amount of jobs has gone down. So how's that going to be fixed?
Yeah, this is a real, RC, this is a real problem. You know, it reminds me, when I was on the debate team at West Point in 1964, the national debate topic was about whether automation was going to destroy jobs in America. And so if we look at it, it's definitely destroyed jobs. It's created new jobs, but it's left a lot of people behind. I think we have to, look, for the first time in the world today, there's enough energy, technology, resources that every single human being could have plenty of food to eat, clothes to wear, shelter, and a family, and raise a family. The question is, how do we measure ourselves? What are our goals in life? And how do we shape a society that takes us in the right direction? So we know that GDP is an inadequate measure of what prosperity really means. We know that people have to find significance and meaning in their lives. I mean, if you look at the terrorists, most of them are not poor. Terrorists are mostly middle-class people who like, I gotta find something to believe in. And so we have to, in the 21st century, it's not enough to simply say, I'm going to put food on the table. You've got to work for values. And the fundamental value is, of course, each other. It's the common interest. It's working for the common good. And there will be more and more jobs like this. I would like to see public service brought back in. I'd like to see us create an environmental service corps, not changing bedpans in hospitals. No, people get paid to do that. Going out into the forests, preserving our national treasures in the forest by picking those pine bark beetles out of the pine trees and evergreen trees in the Colorado mountains, and thinning out the underbrush in California so you don't have those wildfires, and trying to deal with the right way to preserve our country. And I think if we could bring young people into that, we will create a different culture and we will move it forward. But yesterday's jobs won't necessarily be tomorrow's jobs. I think you have to have the foresight to look ahead as an individual and ask, is what I'm learning going to be applicable? How do I use what knowledge I have? How do I build the relationships that I can stay current and go forward in the economy? And for the government, what the government has to do here is look at how to handle these workforce challenges. You probably have heard of, maybe you haven't, but there are firms called headhunter firms. So if you're a big high-priced executive, these firms call you up in the middle of the night and they say, psst, we got a new job for you. Oh, don't tell your current firm, but we can get you $200,000 more a year and you'll be the chief financial officer instead of the controller. But you're going to have to be interviewed for this and tell us all you've done. This goes on all the time for people who don't really need it. The people who really need it are the people at the bottom who have been let go from a job. Someone needs to call them up and say, I know how to get you a job and get you training, and I'm going to lock it in, and trust me. Government can't quite do it. You need private sector incentives to do it, but government should provide those incentives to the private sector. If we did that, we could lead workforce transformation. Now, in terms of manufacturing, just one more thing. You know, most R&D is not paid for in the private sector. It comes from the government. The sad truth is that most R&D comes from the military or medicine. We need wars and the competition of wars in order to invest in far out technologies, because businesses don't like that. Businesses like, hey, you know, I put $1 million a year for the last 5 years, and what did I get for it? And the smart guys on Wall Street, that guy's wasting money on that stuff. Cut it, you're not getting anything out of it. And so business doesn't do the basic and developmental research that's needed. Government does that. And I think if we can become more of a knowledge-centric society with a greater responsibility assumed and funded by government to promote research, not just in warlike applications, but in other applications. For example, there's a technology I'm working with right now in Texas that it can broadcast power around the world, megawatts of power around the world. Is it ready to go? No, it's not ready to go. It needs maybe $3 billion, an army of scientists and engineers. It could be like the Manhattan Project, but it took a war to bring nuclear energy. It shouldn't take a war to bring universal electricity to the world. Just take some imagination and a sort of minimal amount of resources by government standards. We'll always use those resources to create new things. And if you like it, you have to stay current and stay on the frontier, on the edge, and take those risks. And if you don't like taking those risks, you have to accept it and find satisfaction that suits you from other things. But I do think, this country is going to move toward a minimum basic income. It's just the only fair way to do it. You can't have a half dozen people worth trillions of dollars and have millions of families one accident or illness away from bankruptcy. That's not a fair and just society. And ultimately, people won't accept it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And I
Well,
get what you,
stuff in there. So
I get what you said about research and even the internet was, I believe, it was first invented by the military.
Sure. Computing, the internet, all this communication technologies were invested in first by the Defense Department so that they could compete with the Soviet Union. And now that we're competing with China, there'll be another big wave of investments in technologies. But there are a lot of energy technologies out there, like the one I just described, that maybe they haven't captured the attention of national leaders. We need new technologies to help us live in a sustainable economy. We need to be able to reprocess waste. We need to take waste into electricity more efficiently. We need to handle industrial scraps. We need to find new technologies that can use green materials in building. So it's a lot better if you could make radios out of corn plants. Just mess with the genetics of the corn plant and harvest your next cell phone right out of the stalk of the corn plant. Could we do that? Yeah, actually genetics is a lot more complicated than a cell phone. And we just don't understand all about the life sciences. We should. There's so much waiting to be discovered. We know there's dimensions out there in superstring theory that we haven't even detected yet, but we're pretty sure they're there. But what are these folded dimensions? What do they do? What is the nature of time? Is it linear or is it something else? Does it only look linear? If you look at the world, it looks really solid, but it's really just little bits and twirling things of some quantum substance, and it's mostly empty space. It's just, there's so many interesting things that we need to work on.
I hear the philosopher in there now. Well, thanks, Harshdeep.
No, thank you guys.
Oh, no problem. I have a Arkansas politics question.
Okay.
Laura Kurtner, do you want to come on camera and ask your question? It's a great one. See if I can get her.
I see Laura. Hello, Laura.
Hi, thank you, General Clark. Thank you for your service and for speaking to us tonight. I am not, I'm sorry.
We love talking.
He jumps in every time he hears me speak. So my question was, with the recent developments in Arkansas politics, how you see or envision, I heard you speaking of just the principles of progressiveness. As far as Arkansas has turned from a moderate blue state to a very red state in a very short amount of time comparatively. What do you see moving forward as hope for those who are progressive thinkers and not so much a single issue voter? I could go on, but
Well,
I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
I think, each person has to make their own decision. There'll probably be some people who leave the state and simply say, I don't want to be in this state. I want to go where people, are more congenial to my way of thinking. But, most of us who've got roots here and grew up here, we have to work to separate what's needed in the state from the cross currents of national politics. Most of that doesn't involve us. I don't know that there's any radical, angry, militant leftists in the state of Arkansas. But they're a great punching bag. Oh, yeah, let's go after them, But I don't think there are any here. Mostly, it's got a lot of surprisingly well-educated people and a surprisingly moderate state personality that has been overtaken by national political forces that are somewhat irrelevant to the well-being of the state. If you look at what we need in the state is, we did really well with the Affordable Care Act. Mike Beebe got it in and Asa Hutchison kept it, but we've lost a lot of rural hospitals in the state, and that's been a big problem. We've consolidated school districts, and that's hurt a lot of small communities. We still don't have internet wide broadband everywhere in the state. So how can you compete? We have people that are still struggling to survive. We still have racial injustice in the state. So we're not taking advantage of the full spectrum of abilities and talents of everybody in the state. We're still exporting talent from Arkansas. We have to find ways to keep that talent here. We need jobs. And so all these things have nothing to do with the broader issues. And I think it's just, if you don't like politics today, don't worry, because it will probably change. Politics is like a river. You look at it, it's still in the same banks, but every second it's a different river. And as long as we don't lose our democracy, then the people will eventually see through the phoniness of these national issues and say, well, what about here? Now, there's a certain amount of, the thing about America is most people are basically happy. I know it didn't look like that on January 6th, but if you ask most people, are you happy? They'll say yes. I learned this from my stepfather. We were living in Colorado on beautiful Rocky Mountains. I said, Dad, you got to come out. You got to see these beautiful mountains out here. I mean, it's incredible. He said, kid, we got beautiful mountains right here in Arkansas. And, if you look at it, I mean, most people are pretty happy with their own lives. There's always the issue of, your marriage, your children, your in-laws, your boss. You could always use another $1,000 a month. It would always be better if you had more vacation, if the boss was better, or if your child did better in school, there's always these issues. But, to turn philosophical, you have to enjoy and love every day of your life because it's a journey. And if you approach life that way and you try to bring other people alongside you and share those feelings with them, we will get through this period. It's not really fair to describe it on an axis of progressive versus conservative. It's really about self versus others. We live in a community. We have to be concerned about other people. And most of us can't be happy if the people around us are unhappy. We don't want to live in a world like that. Occasionally there are narcissists. Sometimes they rise to the very top. But that's not the way most of us are, and that's not the way we want to live, and we don't want to be in a country governed that way.
All right.
Well, thank you for that perspective.
Yes, thank you, Laura, for your question.
You get to know a lot of pets on Zoom, I have to say.
That's Neil Armstrong.
Love the corgi. I'm going to go ahead and ask Adam Hughes, who has a great question about the military for you, General. Adam, you're still here. Come on.
Yep. Hi, Adam.
Hello, General Clark. Thank you so much for speaking with us. as it pertains to the military, and you mentioned battle fatigue, and us regular citizens walking around, we don't even imagine or think about the fact that we have these conflicts. But what is it that an average citizen that's not in the military could do to help soldiers that are experiencing this battle fatigue?
Well, it's a good question, but honestly, there's not that much you can do other than, I think, if you ask the Army, they would tell you they love the volunteer military because you only get people in there who wanted to be there. But if you look at what's good for the country, we really should be going back to a broader concept of national service. And people should go into the military for a limited period of time from all walks of life. I remember I was teaching up at Amherst about 10 years ago. And Amherst, as you may know, is one of the most selective colleges in America. And the students there were very concerned about the volunteer army. They said, it's not representative of America. What will happen if it continues like this? So I was asked to come up and give a presentation. And so I sat around this little seminar with about 20 really nice college students. And they asked the questions, we talked about it. I said, look, let's put it this way. I would like you to call mom and dad tonight. We were going to meet again the next day and tell them General Clark's here and he's offered me a chance to serve in the military for just 2 years. And he's promised me I can get to Afghanistan or Iraq and have a real experience in leadership, in danger, in risk, in working with people from different backgrounds that will shape my whole life and enrich it incredibly. Should I enlist tomorrow morning? So Saturday morning, we got back together and so they all reported. So it was like this. My mother says I'd be a lot better in diplomacy than I would be in the military. Another one said, my dad said I don't like guns enough, so I'm not going in. My mother said, I can serve better if I become a lawyer. And, there were not one person. I was glad they expressed their concern, but unless people are willing to serve and take the chance, a lot of people did after 9/11. A lot of people who might not have come into the service otherwise, for patriotic reasons, they joined. But I think that should hold whether or not there's a 9/11 event. When you're 18, 20, 22 years old, 2 years seems like an eternity. You can't imagine it. 2 years. I was on CNN one day when I had during the Gulf War, and a woman, one of the producers at CNN, a young woman, said to me on the headset, she said, General Clark, you've had such an interesting career. And I said, well, you could do it too. I mean, join the Army, do your best every day, take care of the people that work for you, be respectful of the people you're working for, do your best, and it'll be an amazing experience. She said, well, I could never join the Army. I said, why not? She said, I couldn't give up my freedom. Okay. I mean, see, I want to wear my hair the way I want when I was back in the 70s. It was like, I'm not going to join the Army because they won't let me have sideburns. Okay. Great. But the amazing thing is, when I deal with people in their 50s and 60s who've had this military experience, they always tell me it was one of the most important things they ever did in their life. And they're not just saying that to flatter me. They have incredible memories and learning experiences when you're thrown into the pot with a bunch of people you didn't grow up with, made to do some things you didn't think you could do, and prove yourself in a different playing field that's built to make you successful. The Army and the armed services, when they bring people in and put them through challenges, they're not going to kill you. They don't want to wash you out. If they did that, they wouldn't be producing trained soldiers or airmen or sailors. They put you under stress, but they want to mold you and make you successful. How can you have a better development program than that? Young people pay tens of thousands of dollars to go on things like Outward Bound and things like this to put themselves under stress and for no purpose other than to develop themselves. And some of those adventures really are dangerous and really do end in trouble. Whereas going to the United States Army or other services, serve your country and learn doing it. If we could just explain this to young people and say, look, I know you think this is a big deal, but 2 years is, life is long. It's long if you take care of yourself. If you have things to do that you believe in and people you're with you love. Life is long. God gives you many opportunities, but you can't replace those formative early experiences. And you need to have the broadest range of experiences. Young people sometimes say, I need a gap year. I'm like, a gap year? What? Okay, mom and dad are going to pay you to go to Australia. What are you going to do in Australia? You know, why don't you let Uncle Sam pay you? Go into the armed forces and do something for the country. And it'll be much more effective than a gap year. But I didn't get any Amherst students enlisted.
All right, great question, Adam. And you'll see in the chat, General, a lot of people are asking you to run for governor of Arkansas.
Well,
Speaking of different opportunities.
no, what I would say, look, I'm flattered. I'm really happy to be asked. You know, it makes me feel good. You know, it's an opportunity that anybody would treasure having. I've been in politics. I've got the T-shirt to prove it. There's one in my closet that hangs there. It says, "Bark for Clark." Shows a picture of a dog. And, you know, politics is a wonderful experience. But at the end of the day, and especially after you've done it once, you have to have the prospect for success. In this state right now, I think there's a lot of sorting out to be done. I hope we'll get a lot of talented people in the race, and I'll be happy to be on the sidelines cheering them on.
Well, I have to say, teaching honor students at the University of Arkansas, this generation coming up is super impressive and very committed to public service.
That's wonderful.
So I'm going to get one final question because I know we're already over time, but and we still have a lot of folks with us, so that's great. We probably could go all night, but I think I'm going to go ahead and end with Tiffany Elder's question, which is quite a good one about political process in the future. So Tiffany, do you want to go ahead and come on and ask your question? If you're still out there, if not, I can ask it. Okay.
And I apologize, my camera's not working.
That's fine, no worries.
Well, first, hello, and thank you so much for this. This has been amazing. But just, and I want to start out too saying, I'm not talking about the conspiracy theories or anything regarding, you know, deleted votes or anything of that nature, but, you know, there's always kind of been concern over our voting processes and how it takes place and who actually has the final say and who's elected. And it did seem like no matter where you came down on the side of the election results, that there was the potential for that to kind of be investigated and looked at, and then the Capitol, you know, a few weeks ago. Do you think that that's maybe still a possibility, or has that just kind of derailed any progress that might have been made in that arena?
Well, first of all, let me just say that the idea that someone could sort of take the entire U.S. election system and rig it, I don't think that's feasible. I mean, not even the smartest Democrat I know could do that. Is it possible that maybe votes have been changed? Absolutely. Look, elections are about the most important thing in a community. They're about power and influence, and ultimately they're about money. So people have lots of incentives to cheat. So in the election of 1960, it was pretty clear that that maybe John Kennedy didn't actually win that election, but some votes were found mysteriously in the Democratic wards of Chicago. It gave him the state of Illinois, and it pushed him over the top. And afterwards, for years and still today, people say that probably was cheating. Now, the man who appointed me to West Point was a congressman in Arkansas named Dale Alford. And he served a couple of terms in Congress, and he ran for governor in the Democratic primary. And when I asked people why he wasn't elected, someone told me, and I don't remember who said this, they said 50,000 votes changed hands in South Arkansas. So, say it isn't so. Could not have happened in our state, but that's what they said. And there have always been dirty tricks in politics. If you read books on election, you'll find that Karl Rove got his start as a dirty trickster in the 1972 Nixon presidential campaign. That's how he got his start in the Republican Party. And so, you know, both sides have been guilty in the past. So in 2016, right after the election, people came to me and said, look, votes were switched in Michigan, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, where Trump won. He should never have won. The Russians got in there and changed those votes. Well, people looked at it. They did the best investigation they could. They couldn't find it. After the 2020 election, I asked the same people, you think there was cheating in this election? They said, probably so. Probably down in those South Florida area where the Democrats should have won and they didn't win. Yeah, probably the Russians got in there and changed those votes. Look, the FBI, the Homeland Security Department's been all over this election. I'm not saying that the election was perfect, but the recounts and the ballots we use today, like if you voted in Arkansas, you used, like I did in Little Rock, use a machine, you put your preference in, it prints out something on paper. You can see actually what it is that you voted for on a paper ballot, and then you stick it back in and it reads it electronically. If there's a recount, they go back to those paper ballots. So that's hard. That's hard to cheat on. And I think we have to do a lot better job of explaining and paying attention to the rigors of the election system. But no one's ever established in the last decade or so that there's been that kind of significant cheating that was reported back 50 years ago or 70 years ago. So I'm pretty comfortable. I think, you know, if you are concerned though, I think you have to act on these things. Should look at who does the local elections, where you are, serve on the election committee, another election coming up in 2 years. Get involved, learn the system, look at it carefully, and satisfy yourself on the integrity of America's democracy. Because there's nothing more important really than the integrity of this vote.
All right, that's an awesome closing. I do notice that the provost of the University of Arkansas is in the audience. Provost Robinson, I see you're trying to connect to audio. Would you like to give the close to this session? If you can, if not, don't worry about it. Katie, can you see if Charles can get on?
Yes, Dr. Robinson, I've made you a co-host. That might help. You should be able to share your camera. I'm not seeing a microphone next to your name though, so I'm not sure where your microphone is.
I think he's having trouble.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, he's having trouble getting in.
Interesting. Yeah, it looks like it's an audio issue, and I'm not sure. I just don't see a microphone there. I apologize.
But don't worry about it. Charles, I understand you're having technical problems, so I wanted you to meet Charles if you haven't, because he's a historian of America, and I know you would. I know you very much.
We'll be able to meet him.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, General. This is wonderful.
So may I just say something?
Absolutely.
Look, first of all, for the people that stuck with me, thank you very much for being here. And you have to live your faith of what you believe in yourself, your associates, your country, and you have to work to make it a better place for everybody. And somehow you have to keep this in perspective. You have to deal with your personal issues, but you got to keep an eye on everybody else and their welfare. I hope you can do this. And if you can set a pattern for doing this for your life, I can promise you this, you'll have a satisfying, rewarding life.
Absolutely.
So
Well,
thank you
thanks.
very much, Dean Koontz, for the opportunity to be with you
Oh,
and with
my
your
pleasure.
students and everyone. Thank you.
My pleasure. And I know we had been chatting about a leadership class, hoping that you're still thinking that you would love to teach our honor students. So Arkansas, let's give them the big hands, the Zoom hands. Come on, everybody. Woo!
Thank you very much, Dean
Thank you
Koontz.
so much.
Or as
Sorry,
we
my
say,
colleagues couldn't get on.
every week, go Hogs!
Go Hogs! Woo!
Thank you all.
Appreciate it. We'll be in touch. No
Thank
escape from us.
All right, let's beat Ole Miss tomorrow night.
All righty. Bye, everybody. Have a good evening. Really appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
That was a great audience.
Thank you.
Yeah.